Welcome back to another episode of Novelio. Today is Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021, and I am reading a brand new book today, starting with chapter 1. This book is entitled It Happened on Dufferin Terrace by Melanie Robertson-King. And I'm just going to read about Melanie and tell you all about her background before we get started. She can also be, her website is also melanierobertson-king.com if you would like and interested in contacting her or looking to buy one of her novels. So Melanie Robertson-King has always been a fan of the written word. Growing up as an only child, her face was almost always buried in a book from the time she could read. Her father was one of the thousands of home children sent to Canada through the auspices of the Orphan Homes of Scotland, and she has been fortunate to be able to visit her father's homeland many times and even met the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, at the orphanage where he was raised. So I'm going to start off with our brand new novel, and here is chapter 1. Gare du Palais, Quebec-City. Spinner's suitcase handle in one hand and her wheeled briefcase in another, Serenity-Lane strolled into the concourse of Gare du Palais. Thanks to the passenger service from Montreal delayed by over 30 minutes, she reached Quebec City late. Via didn't explain the cause. The 35-year-old business consultant prided herself on her timekeeping. Left to her control, she was always punctual. A line of taxis queued along the curb in front of the station. At least they weren't idling, so she didn't need to walk through a cloud of exhaust fumes. Protocol dictated she take the cab at the head of the line. The trunk popped open as she got nearer. Soon after, the cabbie emerged from the driver's side. Où vas-tu? Wonderful. Serenity's knowledge of French was limited. Chateau-Frontenac, she said as she climbed into the back seat, hoping she responded correctly. The force from the lid closing propelled the rear of the car down. Moments later, the driver eased behind the wheel and started the meter. A mixture of old and new buildings whizzed by on both sides as they drove. Some looked like recent construction, but synthetically designed to fit in with those of historical age. One structure in the distance towered over the others. Except for the radio tower, the erection resembled the Empire State Building. In spite of its height, on occasion it dropped from view. A humongous cathedral dominated the foreground. Holiday decorations and clapboard huts monopolized the space on the right, crowded with people. The taxi driver had to stop many times as shoppers wandered from one side of the street to the other. This part of the city had a European flavor. Never having been to Europe, this was the appearance she envisioned. After a few more corners, the extent of the vista where the week of seminars would take place filled the windshield. The towers and turrets gave the impression the castle should be on the pages of a fairy tale. Not that Serenity believed in those. Real life was not like that. At least hers wasn't. Growing up in Toronto was far from the idyllic Prince Charming rescuing the damsel in distress. Even though the hotel loomed in front of them, the operator made another right turn. Again, the New York City icon-like structure came into view. The man steered the car around a small common bedecked with evergreen trees adorned with white mini lights. A horse hitched to a carriage relaxed near the stop sign and another around the corner. Buses queued along the sidewalk, offloading tourists. An archway protected the narrow alley leading to the guest entrance. The cabbie stopped the vehicle and switched off the meter. Wallet out and ready, she withdrew a $20 bill, handed the money to the man behind the wheel. "Keep the change." "Merci, mademoiselle," he replied as he clambered out and hoisted her luggage from the trunk. By the time she extricated herself from the back seat, her belongings waited on the walkway. "Bonne journée," the man called as he scrambled back into the driver's seat. Seconds later, he drove away. A bellman retrieved her bags and took them inside to reception, and she followed. "Serenity-Lane, you have a reservation for me. I'm part of the Thacker, Price and Associates Jonathan Group. We're hosting meetings here beginning tomorrow. Ah, yes, we've put your party in Place d'Armes for your symposium. Just over there if you want to inspect the room while they complete your registration. The conference room was off the foyer, tastefully decorated and more than adequate space-wise. A wireless BenQ projector sat in the middle of the table. The proposal she conceived depended on PowerPoint slides, so the pieces of audiovisual equipment was imperative. A retractable screen swayed from the ceiling at one end of the room. Most hotels offered photocopying services, but in black and white. Prior to departing from Montreal, she found a copy shop and printed the documents in color from her thumb drive. Each of the managers would receive one to accompany the electronic version. Tall panes overlooked the square. The same horse and coach lingered across the street. A cab was now pulled up to the curb in front of it. The red-roofed 1640 bistro on the other side of the green space beckoned. Although the high-end establishment had a range of restaurants, that's where Serenity would have supper, she left the boardroom and returned to the lobby. Your baggage has been taken to your room, the girl at check-in said. Here is your key. I wrote your room number inside the folder. The elevators are just there. Enjoy your stay. Should you need anything, don't hesitate to contact us. Appreciation nodded. Serenity walked to the bank of shiny doors. While she passed the time, she opened the card holder and looked up the information. The bellman left her luggage in the closet space by the door. The lamps turned on, but he was nowhere in sight. The man deserved a tip. But now, or when she checked out, he might not be on duty if she put it off. Leather crossbody bag discarded on the bed, her coat close behind. A small desk stood along the far wall next to the window. The drawn shades offered no clue to the view from this room, river or city. The warren of corridors in the building made it difficult to determine. Blinds elevated. The vista consisted of the edifice opposite reception. Most of her time would be used preparing for meetings or sleeping, so what was visible from her window was unimportant. Freshened up, Serenity made her way across the quadrant to the 1640 restaurant. Darker now than when she arrived, the illumination in the trees and on the buildings showed up much better. The bistro was bustling, but she procured a table without booking in advance. After perusing the menu, she decided on the cheese and cold cuts plank for one and pot of green tea. The local cheeses included ranged from hard cheddar to creamy brie. The meats finished the meal to perfection. By the time she got through her feast and left the eatery, night had fallen. The wind had strengthened while she was indoors. Now her hair whipped across her face. An errant shock tucked behind her ear. She took out her beret out of her coat pocket. Once on her head, she pushed her ash-blonde tresses inside. The promenade overlooking the water looked inviting. Hands rammed deep into her pockets, she wandered over that way. Lights on the opposite shore sparkled and danced in various colors on the dark water. The damp night air chilled her to the bone, so she returned to her room. After tossing her hard shell on the bed, she removed her toiletries and flannel pajamas and completed her bedtime ablutions. She pulled back the covers and crawled into the cozy bed. The following morning, 6 months of grueling work came to fruition. In the Place d'Armes conference room, Serenity turned on her MacBook Air with PowerPoint presentation and ensured the projector functioned, as well as the electronic copy of the photocopies she made in Montreal for the Jonathan's participants were placed in front of each chair. This was the first time her superior sat in one of her meetings, making her more nervous than usual. Did the man not trust her judgment? Scheduled to start at 10 a.m., several attendees were still missing. The time function on her Fitbit indicated 3 minutes to go. The managers had to arrive soon, or her boss's trust in her abilities would be shattered. A brief assessment of her leather-bound notebook confirmed the time and date. Gradually, men in three-piece suits, shirts, and ties straggled in. They nodded at her as they took their seats. During her visits to the outlets across Canada, she came together with them. All were friendly and cooperative. Some stores performed well, while others struggled. The head of Jonathan's made his entrance. Well over 6 feet in stature with a stocky frame, his imposing size commanded respect and attention. "Good morning," she said. The man acknowledged her with a nod of his head and moved to the head of the table. Now she and the other attendees waited for her missing employer and one last Jonathan's employee. We'll give them another 5 minutes, then we'll start. In the meantime, feel free to look at the documents in front of you. She lingered by the chair used by the director of the Vancouver location and smiled. The door burst open, eliminating the opportunity to speak with the gentleman. In the gap stood the man from the Yorkville Avenue outlet, as unkempt as the first time she met him. When he looked up, his eyes bulged and his jaw dropped. "You're the hard-nosed, jumped up high and mighty who made trouble. You're the reason we're having this powwow," he snapped. The hairs on the back of her neck bristled. Coat plucked from the rack, she darted out the door, putting on the garment on the fly. The man busted her straight away. No way could she head this meeting now. Where was Martin Thacker? He would have stood by her. She left the hotel, turned right, and scurried through the arched vehicular entryway on Rue Saint-Louis. From there, she stumbled to the boardwalk running adjacent to the spectacular architecture and overlooked the St. Lawrence River and the town underneath. Snow packed down from shoveling and plowing made the boards slippery. High-heeled shoes were inappropriate for the conditions, but escaping that room was paramount. Why did she allow the man to antagonize her? Any other time, any other meeting, and she would have let comments like this roll off her. This action was out of character. Struggling to maintain her balance, she picked her way to the handrail. At least she had gloves in her pockets. After extracting the knitted mittens, she pulled them on her hands and tried to regain her composure so she could go back to the meeting. She would have to create an excuse for her sudden departure. Arms resting on the railing, she took in long, slow breaths. Each time she exhaled, a puff of steam formed in front of her. About to go back into the warmth of the hotel's conference room, she let go and turned. A massive black dog charged at her with a man and a boy in pursuit. The ear flaps on the man's trapper hat resembled wings. Stretched out horizontally, how he managed not to take flight astounded her. "Tory, bad girl, halt!" The man shouted commands to the canine, but the animal was oblivious to them. Before she had an opportunity to react, the black lab launched itself into the air and hit her square in the chest, knocking her to the ground. The impact sent her eyeglasses flying, and they crashed on the granite ledge beneath the handrail. The child dove for them, but couldn't get a proper grip. His fingertips brushed the frames, and her eyewear skittered away from him on the icy rock and vanished. Chapter 2. Thacker, Price & Associates, Bay Street, Toronto. 6 months earlier. Frustrated over her inability to balance her previous month's expenses, Serenity shouted. Each time she came up with a different answer. She snapped her pencil in half, slammed the writing tool on her desk, and threw herself back into her chair. Something simple had to be. Otherwise, the thing would be balanced by now. She took off her cheaters and tossed them aside before propping her elbows on the work surface and massaging her temples. When that failed to help, she rose and walked to the window. Even on the dullest days, the field of vision from here calmed her. New City Hall, with its curved towers, stood on the opposite side of the street. Off to the left, through the maze of high-rises, Lake Ontario was just visible. More and more of the panorama vanished behind scaffolding and skyscrapers. The recession didn't slow the construction boom along the lakeshore. There would be precious little to see at all if not for Thacker, Price & Associates, occupying the uppermost floor of the building. The rain lashed against the glass in the deluge and formed rivulets that ran down to the sill. Her day started bad and maintained its downhill progression. On her walk to the subway stop from her condominium on trendy Yorkville Avenue, an expensive SUV sped through a puddle, sending a spray of water over her. A few minutes later than usual, Serenity swooped out the door, so she didn't have time to go back home and switch into something clean. At least she kept a complete outfit at work in case of an emergency. Given time, she would have taken down the vehicle's plate number, found the owner's identity, and sent them her dry cleaning bill. She gazed out, attempting to clear her mind. The phone chirped its annoying tone. Panic ensued when her boss's name, Martin Thacker, appeared on the screen. "Serenity-Lane, how can I help you?" she said, making an effort to remain calm and pleasant. "Can you come to my office, Ms. Lane? There's something I want to discuss with you." "Certainly, I'll be right there." Even though her expenses didn't balance, she had until the end of the following week to complete it. Had something gone wrong on her last job? Was she about to receive the golden handshake? That would not happen. She worked too hard to get this close to the top. The glass ceiling broke when she applied for and got the high position retail consultant post. Putting her glasses back on, she gathered her notebook, favorite Parker ballpoint pen, and hurried to Martin Thacker's office. Before knocking, she smoothed her skirt and braced herself, then turned the knob. "Come in, Miss Lane. Take a seat," he said, gesturing to one of the black leather club chairs in front of his massive mahogany desk. She slipped into one of them and started to elevate her right leg over her left and stopped. The skirt was a bit too short and too much thigh would show. On second thought, she opted to cross her feet and her ankles and sit at a slight angle to his workspace. The trouser suit from before was perfect, but after the dousing she got, it was out of the question. The outfit she kept at work needed to be replaced with something less revealing. "I have an assignment for you, Serenity. Hope you don't mind me calling you by your first name." The man eased his tail frame into the high-backed desk chair. "No, that's quite all right," she said, tucking the hem of her skirt nearer to her knee, uncomfortable with the familiarity. "Jonathan Drake, the head of the high-end department store chain The Jonathans, has hired us. An in-depth study on each of his stores requires our expertise." A file folder skimmed across the desk. "To see which outlets are performing, which aren't, and what they need to do to keep the business from failing. As you know, they are over 100 years old and one of the last family-owned retail empires to survive this long." She reached for the docket, flipped open the folder, and scanned the subject matter. "A conference call with the client is scheduled in the morning at 9:30. Next Monday, you'll begin visiting every Jonathan's location countrywide to gain a feel for what changes are needed to reverse the fortunes of the company." Pencil twirling back and forth between his thumbs and forefingers, Martin Thacker reclined. Doesn't give me much time to prepare. Do a good job, Serenity, and there could be a raise and promotion in it for you. Perhaps even a partnership." The man rose from his chair. "I won't let you down, Mr. Thacker." Stomach performing acrobatics, it was impossible to show restraint. She wanted to shout, scream, anything but remain professional. In her boss's office, a spectacle of that nature would not be tolerated. Not wanting to embarrass herself, she scooped up the file in her notebook and returned to her own. Chapter 3. Thacker, Price and Associates, Bay Street, Toronto. She scooped up the file in her notebook and returned to her own. Back in her space, Serenity leaned against the solid wood door. "Yes, yes, yes," she squealed, pumping her fists in the air before twirling and dancing her way to her desk with a broad, cheesy grin pasted on her face. This assignment was monumental. With the incredible opportunity presented to her, she couldn't let the company down. For the longest time, she daydreamed about her surname on the company's signage, resigned to the fact hers would never come before her immediate supervisor, nor would it trump the late Mr. Price's. Still, Thacker, Price, Lane, and Associates had a great ring. The firm's name, including hers, rolled off the tongue. It took a few long, slow breaths to calm down. Once past her initial giddiness, she opened the browser on her MacBook Air and searched Jonathan's. The Wikipedia entry stated the family founded the firm and began operations in 1889, trading under the same name as now. The business started as a dry goods outlet selling articles imported from Scotland and England. The principal location in Quebec-City continued in its original building on Rue Saint-Jean between Hôtel Dieu and Couillard. Over the years, the company expanded into the neighboring space. Now, retail stores were in every major metropolis across Canada from Vancouver to Halifax. Only the provinces of Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland and Labrador remained Jonathan's free zones. The conglomerate didn't have a web page. Most businesses had one. Whether it was kept up to date or not was a different thing. The absence of a virtual existence hoisted a huge red flag. Next, she opened a second tab and searched the client's finances at Dunn and Bradstreet. All appeared to be satisfactory as far as their reputation for making timely payments. Most days, Serenity worked until well after 7 o'clock. Today, she had to take her trouser suit to the dry cleaners near her home and pick up a few things at the supermarket. She turned off her MacBook Air and gathered the accoutrements she needed to carry on with her research into Jonathan's from home. When she squeezed her way into the subway car, it seemed more crowded than usual. She found herself sandwiched between a 6-foot something tall man and a short, gray-haired senior with her folding shopping cart. As people jostled for space, Serenity's ankle and the cart made a contact. Every time the man moved, the newspaper under his arm smacked her in the head. A draft of stale air flooded the carriage through an open window when the train began to move. Blended with body odor, strong perfume, and the Limburgery scent of stinky feet, she couldn't breathe. To take her mind off the smells and assaults on her en route to Bloor Young Station, Serenity churned over concepts introduced during the conference call. The creation and maintenance of a website topped her series of changes coupled with a social media presence. Whether he agreed with her or not was something else. As an announcement informing a delay came over the PA, she walked to the platform to catch the connecting subway that would take her to the cleaners. The holdup could be as short as 5 minutes or indefinite, so she made her way to the exit closest to Cumberland Street. At some point when she was in the subterranean cavern, the rain had stopped. The sun reflecting off the plate glass of one of the many high rises blinded her. She rifled through her handbag for Oakley sunglasses. Absorbed in finding them, she stepped off the curb. If not for another pedestrian at the crosswalk, she would have walked into the path of the car speeding through the intersection, running the red light. A quick glance at her rescuer, taller than her, slim, and clothed in a navy blue 3-piece suit, he had the appearance of someone who belonged on the pages of a fashion magazine. Trying to remain professional, she mouthed her gratitude. The man smiled and started across the thoroughfare, leaving Serenity behind, her mouth gaped open in awe of what might have happened had he not stopped her. In the distance, an emergency vehicle siren wailed. Usually she didn't hear the sound of, or was so used to it she blocked it out. Toronto was a perpetual construction zone, so the pungent smell of hot asphalt wafting through the air came as no surprise. The same with the pounding racket of a jackhammer. The unpleasant whiff of exhaust fumes mingled with the aromas of cooking food circulating through ventilation systems. Trundling her computer case down Cumberland Street with her trouser suit over her arm, Serenity proceeded to the dry cleaners. Someone advanced wearing baggy jeans, a dark hoodie, head down and their ball cap on sideways. Cables dangled from his ears to his mobile phone. To avoid the imminent collision, she sidestepped his path and rammed her knee into a fire hydrant. Chapter 4. Jonathan's Bloor Street, Toronto. The majority of her work clothes were purchased from the Hudson Bay Company, occasionally a few things at Holt Renfrew, but only at the latter during their end-of-season sales. Now she found herself on Bloor Street, opposite one of the stores belonging to the Drake family. People referred to this segment stretching between Yonge Street and Avenue Road as Toronto's Fifth Avenue because of the high-end jewelry and clothing retailers. Jonathan's didn't fit in with this image of the Golden Mile. The building, one of the older structures on the block, looked shabby compared to the rest. The window displays, while well done, were a period behind the others on the strip. The storefront held no customer appeal, nothing to entice people in off the street like the other stores. Until now, she didn't know this business existed. With no webpage, the only way a person would find out about the location was to use the traditional printed telephone directory. How many people did that anymore? Despite it being a 3-way call, not a face-to-face the next morning, Serenity felt more confident meeting someone for the first time when wearing new clothes. After retracting the case's handle, she clutched the leather straps and entered. The exterior was terrible and inside was far worse. The apparel on the racks hung in haphazard fashions. Flashes of various hues littered the floor under empty hangers. Folded sweaters and trousers remained untidy after customers had plundered through them. Observations made as she went. Serenity walked through the main level. In one spot, the floor felt sticky under her feet. Once she found a clerk, she approached the young girl. "Is the manager in today?" "Dunno. Only work here. Come in, punch my time card, and punch out at the end of the shift." With a demeanor like that, this girl would never go far in any vocation. "Is this store always such a mess?" "Most times. Why? You an inspector or something?" Little Miss Attitude fiddled with her hair as she spoke. While Serenity attempted to extract some useful intelligence from the girl, a man with an unkempt appearance approached. Closed-set eyes framed his long, narrow nose. Head balding, what hair remaining was styled into a comb-over. Mid-40s, one side of his shirt tail draped over the waistband of his trousers. His tie sported stains from meals and liquids, and his shoes donned splatters of spilt coffee, and who knows what else. "Excuse me," she called out and walked to him. "I'm looking for the person in charge." "You found him. What do you want?" The man folded his arms over his chest. If this was an intimidation tactic, it was not going to work. "I wanted to talk to you about the condition of this store." "What business is it of yours?" The manager couldn't discover, at least not yet. She held a position with the firm hired to perform the consultancy. "I was in the neighborhood. Never been in before, so I thought, why not? The window displays really should be updated." She stopped before saying anything more. Too much talk like that and he would know something was up. "All the other stores on the street are a season ahead of you. The intention was to come in and browse for some new work clothes. Now I wish I hadn't. This place is dirty. The displays are a mess and clothing is on the floor under the racks. Look, I'm doing you a favor by mentioning this. Tidy the place up inside and out and you'll be able to compete." Worried she went too far with her last statement, she chewed her bottom lip. "Look, lady, I don't need some jumped up high and mighty in here and telling me how to run my store." The man snatched her by the arm and escorted her to the exit. "Now get out." He opened the door and propelled her through the portal. Self-control waning, Serenity grit her teeth and took in a deep breath. The man deserved a comeuppance, but she couldn't give it to him here. That would jeopardize the Jonathan's contract, so she kept silent. The run-in would be documented later while her supper cooked.